Well, a big question would be like why people would use this product at all. Like that would be a big question, really, like trying to understand what is the purpose of this product in people's life. It's just like, well, that's a big question. You make a lot of assumptions, so there's a lot of uncertainty there, a lot of things that you'd be like, well, like a lot of like let's say risky assumptions, right? So assumptions that if you make, you may just go down a path on the design side that is just not really relevant then for people. So that would be a big question.
The Research Labs podcast by SundayPyjamas.
Hello, everyone. We are here with another episode in the product design series, and I'm excited to introduce our next guest, who is a principal product designer at Typeform and is also currently mentoring a lot of people, including me. So, yeah, I had one session and it was great. So, we have Oriol on the show today, and I'm excited to introduce him. Welcome to the show, Oriol. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, it's Friday afternoon here in Barcelona time. As you said before, this is the start of my weekend.
Yeah, I think we'll start with a broader question, like what challenges do you like working on in general, and then maybe in terms of product design as well, product.
Definitely, if I go into an aspirational kind of like line of thought, I would think of problems that are useful and that solve meaningful problems for people, right? So things that really, yeah, impact people's life in a positive way. I mean, I don't aspire to, solve people's lives in general, but just to make their lives perhaps a little easier, a little more, I don't know, joyful. That's it. So any other problems like I enjoy solving. And then, of course, if the company that I do it for is a company that's trying also to generate a positive impact in society, so not necessarily all the time thinking about perhaps like finance, perhaps, or e-commerce, and with all my respects to these companies, but that's also why I'm currently at Typeform, right? So it's also I see that what we do at Typeform is a way of improving how people can communicate, can have a conversation, of course, on the basis of collecting the data. Sorry of these people, but it's not necessarily for commercial means directly. I mean, that data could be used for commercial means, but it's not the first purpose.
And you were saying that related to startups, or what challenges do you like to solve to help startups, let's say, with product?
I'm a really, let's say, like detailed thinker in the way that I really like to think about systems and structural problems. So, in that sense, I'm definitely drawn to bigger features and, imagining things that maybe are not there. That doesn't mean that I enjoy it all the time, but I do like to do a fair amount of those complex features that requires thinking about different personas, thinking through different use cases and different flows, and closing well the flows between different, let's say, parts of the product. So thinking holistically, it's definitely the type of problems I like to solve most. But as said, not all the time. I also like, if possible, to combine these with smaller problems, or perhaps also to just give feedback to my colleagues in the product design team, and definitely on a smaller scope. So combining both really does, is where I find my sweet spot. But if you make me choose, I would definitely go for the more abstract and complex ones.
Right. And I also wanted to ask, what does it mean to be a principal product designer? Like, what are your, do you manage a team? Do you work on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. I think that's different. Let's say it's different to every company. And at Typeform, basically, that means that I'm the main responsible for design in a I mean, multidisciplinary team with different, let's say, people from like development, but also data, also product management, and I'm the responsible on the product design side. And yeah, and I lead projects from product design really hand in hand not only with the PM in my team, but also with a product director, for example, in a more of a strategic level. So I definitely also have some influence on that. So not only on the day-to-day hands-on work, but also on the strategy work. So that's what it also means on one side in terms of work as a principal at Typeform. So contributing as an AC, right, as an individual contributor, leading projects, but also to the strategy. Besides from this Typeform, that also means contributing to the product design team by leading product projects that also contribute or benefit the whole design team, the whole product design team. Like I don't know, it could be from I don't know, for example, doing projects across the whole product, like working on the navigation of a specific part of the product, or it could be something more operational, like thinking about the methodology we use in teams and how we organize those yeah processes, stuff like that. So it could also be this. So it's quite diverse, I'd say. But yeah, so in the end, at least in Typeform, there's also a lot of room for people to speak up and say what what part do they feel more comfortable, what things do they want to own. So there's a lot of also agency from that perspective.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing that. I think you also write. I've seen a couple of articles which you shared um, around user needs. So I think any problem, like when you approach a problem statement or a project, it starts with understanding what the user needs, what the client needs. So how does one there and there are various like methods for that. Um, but what is your thought process on an approach on user research, and how does one really understand the user's needs to build on that?
Yeah, I mean you're referring to like an article that I wrote, I guess, on Medium, like I think it's 2018, so it's like 4 years ago now. But I think like I
I'm sure your thought has evolved on how you would like to do
absolutely, and I think that in the end, this article I wrote back in 2018, and even if my thinking has evolved, it does speak for very much of the basics of what I think research stands for and should stand for in companies. And said, I mean, even if I wrote it in 2018, I still see people or I get notifications on Medium from people who is, let's say, clapping or liking the article or putting it into their collection. So it seems that it's something which still prevails as something useful for people, even if I written it some time ago. Um,
it's still relevant.
I think so. I mean, at least that's what I can assume from, seeing again people liking it, and now you mentioning it, and I said that for me, it just really tries to set up some foundations for research, as in understanding, user needs and how to do that. And yeah, I mean, just talking about the article, what I wrote in the article, and talking about how to figure out user needs. I think the whole article really boils down to I'd say like three things. The first thing is that basically to figure out the real user needs, you do need to have dedicated researchers, and in the way that you need to have a company that believes in building a user centric culture, and that means having researchers, right? Having dedicated people that only do research. So definitely the topic of culture is important in the article. So besides from companies having like a stronger or more, let's say, user-centered culture, which is again based by having just more researchers, ideally. The second thing is understanding that also research, when you do research, you it's important to take the time to do research in the way that companies not only do, let's say, evaluative research, so not only user tests or concept testing, but also discovering, so some research discovery in a way that they are trying to generate insights. So generative research mostly uh, is about the time you have and the quality of time you have to speak about people broadly about their lives and the and the way they go about using your product or any other product. So, and it is important to take time because when you have the time to speak with people in that manner, in that way that you're trying to generate insights, it is good to then lose the habit of trying to then ask people why they do things the way they do. And it's more a matter of taking the time to really make questions to understand the context around it, to understand questions about that would start with what, or questions that would start with like how they do things, right? So trying to really understand the context so that you can understand the why, because the worst thing you could do as a research is trying to make assumptions about why people do the things they do. Um, Only by asking them, because it's just, I'm also mentioning these in the article, but if you ask people what they want, they mostly would tell you things that then they wouldn't actually want in their real lives, right? Because maybe they are ashamed of telling you why they want the things they want, or maybe they just don't know because they're biased. So again, the second point or the third point exactly in the article is telling researchers to do that job of guessing why themselves, because that's their job basically, right? The job they have is to understand why, and you understand why basically by putting all those points together. So that was the
Yeah, I think we started to dig into user research, and there are people doing user research. So I would like to learn more about it. Like, what does it involve? Like, how do you gather those insights? It's through interviews, through sending type forms, sometimes um, collecting data in different formats. Like, if it's a website, there might be some heat maps.
as
So
well.
that is one way, that some ways that I can think of. What are the other ways to collect data, and then how do you actually process that information? So let's talk about collecting those insights and what are some ways you've used.
Yeah, I think, I mean, generally speaking, when you talk about research, the first thing you want to know before jumping into research is understanding what will the research answer. Meaning, do you have a very big question, or a more smaller question? Big question would be a question in which you have a lot of uncertainty, in which you don't feel sure at all that you know anything about this problem.
Big question might be like the whole product itself, like if you're testing an MVP, and small might be like if you're testing a new feature, let's
Well,
say.
a big question would be like why people would use this product at all. Like that would be a big question, really, like trying to understand what is the purpose of this product in people's life. It's just like, well, that's a big question. You make a lot of assumptions, so there's a lot of uncertainty there, a lot of things that you'd be like, well, like a lot of like, let's say, risky assumptions, right? So assumptions that if you make, you may just go down a path on the design side that is just not really relevant then for people. So that would be a big question. Smaller questions are questions in which you again have certainty, and they are perhaps more operational, like things about usability testing. You were mentioning about before about the heat maps. Heat maps could be useful to understand problems about usability, to understand, where are people mostly perhaps focusing their attention, um, and where they are not. So that could basically be a way of trying to understand usability from a high level, but that's still kind of I'd say a small problem.
So once we have
Yeah. So yeah. So should we talk about like the big ones or the big type of problems? Like how to approach those and what methods could be used? I mean, I think in a nutshell, you could choose depends. I mean, then it depends then on the time you have, because it's always it's a reality. Not people don't have a unlimited time to do research. And of course, if you have the time, if you have the resources, if you have the money, if you have everything, the best method is always interviewing people, and ideally contextually. I did this, I think, in all my career for two projects in my life. So it's really rare that you get to do this. But it's of course, and we all know that it's just this sort of contextual research is the best because basically you get to see people in their own context while they use the product. Um, so that's one way. The other way of also doing contextual research, in which is not synchronous, right? Like speaking with people, is that also giving people the assignment of them recording their own interactions with the product. I mean, of course, in both cases, people are incentivized, so you would pay people for their time. But basically, this is a way of, I mean, you can get some biased information, but it's another realistic way to get contextual, right? You ask people to have a diary, and these days you can do it in many ways to keep up that diary, in which they would just give you updates on how they use their product day by day. So I think these are really the best kind of methods, if you have the time, if you have the resources. Otherwise, you can choose, let's say, methods which are more asynchronous as well, and are less contextual, like you were mentioning, Typeforms, right, or any sort of form or survey. Of course, this is really great because it also works at scale. So again, if you have a really broad customer base and you want to validate or generate a lot of ideas, then it could be really good to go into this sort of generative research.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that, how do you urge people to give you feedback or, collect that information that, what is working, what's not working. And turns out there is like commercial ways to do
Hmm.
it. Like there are websites like usertesting.com, which incentivizes users to review something and put their thoughts in video and audio format. And I believe you, yeah. It sometimes it might be biased. Like you never know if they are the actual users of the product.
Yeah.
And I think like it would be something to think like how to build a committed user base who would actually review
Mm.
your product from time to time and give you real feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's a good question. I think it goes into, for me, it goes in two directions. The first one is about user testing and how to screen users in the end. I think that's perhaps where your question would go, because in any platform where people are incentivized for their time, well, you have to definitely, even when you speak with people on user interviews, like longer ones, not inside of usertesting.com, you have to, of course, do some screening to understand if that customer is, will have relevant insights for you. So I think that's the first one, as a way to mitigate having perhaps, crappy insight, because in the end, if people make it through make it through your screener, the questions you have to filter out candidates, it's kind of like you haven't done a good screener then. Um, that's what I would think. And then the second one you were mentioning of like how to get this sort of like research in a way that it's um, in a way that it's you because you were saying maybe it would be interesting to get constant feedback. And I think, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I know how it works at Typeform, and I know that that's also how it works at other companies, in the way that a lot of departments speak with users, not only design or not only research. If you think in a way, sales speak with users more often than designers or research too, probably every day. Same goes for customer support. They speak with customers every day. Um, I mean, I know of companies, for example, that when designers join, they go to the customer support team, or they shadow the customer support team for a few weeks as a way to understand their customers, because, well, that is really, yeah, it's
That
it's
makes
there.
sense. Yeah. The customer support is where all the queries and i- information or problems where they're stuck is coming through. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think like a quick way to to get that glimpse of users, and it's kind of like free, so you don't have to organize, for that matter, interviews. But something what I do every time I jump into a new, let's say, problem that I have to solve is first of all reviewing customer support tickets and seeing if there's any ticket which is related, first of all, with that area where I'm trying to solve the feature for, and secondly, if I see any sort of, insight that kind of like takes me in the direction of the problem that I'm trying to solve. So, and that is, I'd say, kind of like for free because it's insights are there. You just have to go through that, and it's really a matter of trying to build a habit of using these insights, and and just yeah. So that's something I, of course, I guess it's not, let's say, it's not groundbreaking for a lot of people, but I think maybe for others, it's just a matter of building the habit of doing this, because there is a lot of interesting insight you can find, and you can also even try to get that insight and try to put it in some sort of platform where the insight is analyzed, and then you can also, at a higher level, if you have a lot of course, customer support tickets, you can understand sentiment. It's like, do you know month by month if that product area are we getting more like positive or negative feedback? However, the algorithm understands positive, negative. So that could be another way also of scaling that process for you, so you don't have to check every week or every now and then and just pick up random tickets, but just having a broader perspective.
Yeah, right. If the data is in large amounts, it would be great to process it through sentiment analysis and tools like that. I
Yeah,
really like the part where you go to the customer support team and you spend time there to understand the pain points.
absolutely.
So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think it's great. I hope every company would do something like this. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I would like to ask you about something that you mentioned on one of the articles, that designers put lipstick on a UI and call it invisible interface. So, could you break that down a little for us?
Yeah, that was another article I wrote, I think, a year before I wrote I think it was 2017 or end of beginning of 2018. So it's a while back. So I have to try to recall a little bit. But I think that it all came up from this book that it was written by Golden Krishna, Gold Krishna. This designer was on Google back then. He has this book that is called No UI, No Interface is the Best Interface, or I don't know how it's called now. But it's talking about basically about smart technology.
Good design is hidden in plain sight, is it?
Yeah, I don't remember how's the book. I have it here somewhere in my library. Let me grab it because I have it here and I want to make sure. Ah, there it is. The best interface is no interface. Golden Creation, exactly. So that's the book. You can see nothing because there's no interface,
Oh,
right?
is it? Okay, that's the cover.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the letters are like embossed, sort of, and you can read no interface. But then the title is here. You see. So yeah. So I read. I mean, I read that book back then, and I was part of a book club, UX book club, and then we kind of analyzed or discussed the book. And based on that discussion, I came to write this article, sorry, in Medium. And basically what I'm trying to say is that all these smart technology like smartwatches or glasses or any sort of gadget nowadays, they called smart, and they do have some sort of UI, but then it is more lipstick in a way that the people who are creating those gadgets are just trying to create problems more than solve one in a way. So it's just like trying to force innovation in a world that perhaps doesn't need it. So I think in that article there's a GIF that I'm having that I added where you see literally this sort of like futuristic person like looking into a watch and doing some sort of like things in the watch, and you're and it's absurd, and um, in the end, what I'm my call out in that sense, to go more into a constructive thread, is to trying to use more of like the jobs to be done theory to innovate, in which you understand people's context to you know give them a functional and also emotional solution that improves, or makes their life a little easier to achieve something they do want to achieve, instead of trying to generate some sort of like fictional solutions or problems for these people. You know what I mean? Like, why does somebody needs a watch where they have to fiddle and stuff, and it's
Not enforcing the fancy stuff. I think what I perceived was like, don't decorate it, or I think the lipstick part of it actually meant that. So correct me if I'm wrong.
no,
And
for sure.
invisible interface, meaning like it gets hidden in plain sight. Like you just shouldn't notice it. It should be that good.
Correct. Yeah, I think also, I'm also refreshing my mind as I speak about it. And I think there was also this quote from Don Norman that I added, where he talks about simplicity. So Don Norman also has this book about simplicity. I'm not gonna pull it out, but basically he talks simplicity in a way that it could seem counterintuitive, in a way that he says making something simple is not removing things necessarily, but it's keeping the things that make more sense. um, right? So yeah, so it's in that sense, it's trying again to make something useful for the purpose that that person wants to give to that object or to that application or whatever, right? So and just keeping the things which are essential, and to understand the things that are essential, you have to understand the context that people are in. And the more you know about that, the more useful you can do that thing, and the more then you can simplify things, because you just keep the things which are really relevant. The rest you are certain you can remove. The problem is when you start just subjectively removing things just because they seem somehow annoying to you, or you just because you want to simplify. But you know what I mean? It's a bit of like a, if you think about it in this way, it seems like a absurd term to simplify by just removing things just for the sake of it. But sometimes I think this really happens.
Yeah, there needs to be a balance. Like, how much do you simplify? How much do you make it complex by adding stuff? Right, becomes
Yeah,
intuitive.
yeah,
Like as you go
absolutely.
by building more interfaces or building more parts of a product. With time, you get that like a hang of it. How much should I balance? Like, and then present it to the user. I mean, you cannot ask the user how do you think this is complex, this is simple. Like you have to really choose what you need to ask. And like circling back to our user research part, um, how much should you own and how much should you try to explore from the user with the
Yeah,
user?
that's a very good question, because I see this happening already in this, in the design world and designers, in the way that it's the same thing I said before about asking about why. It's like sometimes I do hear these, like, about like people asking users if they like things, or if they, how far this is something they would use. And all these are hypothetical questions. That's a problem. I don't think research is about making theories on based on hypotheses and trying to hypothesize about things. I think it's actually the opposite. It's trying to validate and understand better to actually narrow down on the hypothesis you have to start with. So, you know, I think that as much as research can do is to ask about behavior. So and behavior is not the secret sauce, because people can tell you what they did yesterday, and maybe tomorrow they will do another thing, because we are emotional creatures and we don't respond necessarily you know, to a very determined pattern. We have emotions, and sometimes, I don't know, we've been doing something our whole life, and that perhaps really tells us that we can continue doing that same thing the rest of our lives. but it could change. It could change. So I mean, like in the end, again, asking people about hypothetical questions, like, would you use this thing if I would do X, Y, Z, is a very bad question because it's a hypothetical question. Maybe they say, yes, maybe I would use it, but it just, then it's you trying to validate something in a way. You're trying to force the validation. You're trying to make a question which you would perhaps get that yes, and then you're done. But it's not really about that. It's more asking the person if understanding their context and understanding whether this is something. Yeah, I mean, yeah, more than asking if they would use it is like how would they go about, you know, how would they go about doing something with that product, right? Because then that speaks for, again, what they would do, but also for what they've been doing. And yeah, I don't know if I'm giving you a good answer here, but as said, I think what I'm trying to say is that we should really focus when we do research on behavior more than on desires.
Say that would you use this, like that's a fantasy question, and that's the whole context of the user and you being there, like in the meeting, or let's say on a form, or through any medium. That's the whole point of it. So it cannot be that direct, it has to be a little subtle, and that's your way to ask specific things, like what they would do with the product. And while you were sharing this, I was wondering if it would be a good idea to ask about compare your product to competitors at some point of the user research, or is it like a very bad idea? Would you use?
No, no, no. I think it's a good idea, definitely always to put in context. And it's like, I am the energy is like trying to understand, okay, I'm selling that's perhaps product A, or I'm working for product A and I competitors product B. And the question would be like, how have been you using this product in the past? And then when you tell me things about this competitor, I understand which things are perhaps useful for you. Instead of asking you what are the useful questions of this or the useful things of this, you see, these are the two different questions. So it's one you're trying to understand behavior, and the other one you're trying to enforce, you're trying to shortcut the answer, because your question in the end is like, what is useful for you? But it's like, how are you using this thing? And then I understand what's useful for you. I can always circle back and say, hey, I'm hearing that you're saying these things. From these things, what is most useful for you? So I could also, kind of like reinforce that if I really want to know about that way, but not the other way around. Otherwise, I may get really biased answers.
Yeah. So if in the conversation, like if the topic comes across that, hey, I've used this, like, which is what you're saying, and if the person is, I believe, more who has used a lot of products, like people like us, we will kind of try to break it down into what exactly is it that we liked, and we could articulate it better. But for the end consumers who don't understand the product lingo a lot, which they don't have to, you'd have to frame the questions and uh, get the data in a way that they understand. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and that relates to our lives in the end. That's what they can really speak about. I mean, talking about features is, they're not. I mean, they like the features, but it's more understanding how.
you can talk in the context of the problems that it will solve, like, and then you can process that. Okay, if this problem is being solved, this is the feature it connects to. So
Yeah, exactly. Correct. Exactly. So that's right. You got it correct. That's the way to think about it. Instead of, getting people to talk about technology doesn't make sense because you know more about technology than actually they do. And that's, I mean, generally, and that's all right, but you don't know so much about them, about their lives. And that is what you really want to know. Um, and again, this doesn't mean that it's prescriptive. Doesn't mean that they will do the same thing the same way tomorrow. And I think that's the exciting part about research, and that's what it's exciting to me also about human behavior. It's literally unpredictable. You can try to guess it, and you can be right, but you can also be very much wrong.
Yeah, just need to understand where they're coming from, like their background, what have they done in the past, or the place they are in, or what are their, what is their lifestyle like. I think customer personas come to my mind when I think of that, like having that context of you understanding them first and then going into understanding them even further with those specific interviews. And when you frame them in that way, that hey, this is the problem that is being solved, like you focus on them instead of your product. Like though you're meeting for you meet them for getting feedback on the product, but if you focus on them, give them that attention, that, that's also, I think, a way to build a loyal customer base if they are your customers.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think people also like to speak about themselves, like generally speaking, right? So it's great.
I saw this collection of yours on the Tumblr site. There are a lot of interactions. You have to tell me how those work and how you make them, because there are a lot of interactions and um, they're great. Yeah. So what inspired you to like build that collection? I'm sure you build it from time to time, or how did you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a Tumblr I put together. I think even before I wrote those articles on Medium. So this yeah page on Tumblr that is called the slash between for the ones that I want to check it out. And it's basically abandoned. So just first things first. In the way that I'm not posting there anymore since a very long time. But this came, I mean, answering to your question, this was a year project. So I started, I don't know, on a January or February. I don't know when was the first post, but sometimes at the beginning of a year, or sometime at the beginning of a year, I thought of putting together this Tumblr because it all started with me trying to figure out, you know, what in so trying to give examples of interfaces that connect well the UI and the UX. That's really what the Tumblr is about. So it's trying to show and give examples of cases in which the UI is part of the UX as well, and vice versa, right? So there's a good combination of both. And that came as basically as a statement or something that I also wanted to convey, yeah, to say, hey, you know, uh, I don't know, things that I was seeing, for example, on Behance back then. I mean, now Behance is smaller. I think that, I mean, I'm also not so active anymore, but I even also used to post stuff on Behance, like, I don't know, many years ago. So I was seeing a lot of UI, which was looking beautiful, but was absolutely pointless. And it was not interactive. It was just thought really for just making things look pretty. And the other way around, I was also seeing interactions that were really clunky and really not trying to contribute anyhow to the UI. So yeah, so I started like doing grabbing GIFs from different platforms and different websites, and I was kind of like very much. So it was a way for me also to be in touch with like new releases of features from products, but also innovation stuff, and not necessarily all mobile. So could also be also some sort of devices or some sort of like websites which were a little more commercial, in which the interactions are a little more. They're not so functional, right? They're not like platforms, but just basically some commercial websites where they have really well-crafted interactions that really the UI and UX really convey a message. So as I said, so I started grabbing those images and making GIFs, and I was sometimes like interacting myself with the UI and doing a GIF of that interaction of. So basically, if you go to Tumblr, you see screen grabs, so to say, which are like video screen grabs, which are turned into GIFs, and then it's just the whole Tumblr full of GIFs. And I was posting, the challenge was to post a GIF every day for a year. and I think I managed more or less. And yeah, I think I mean, it was really great to, again, it helped me to do a few things. But the first thing was for me to get more in touch with latest things which were happening in the, design scene from that perspective, and also to build some sort of community. Like a lot of people, I could see people who were basically following my Tumblr to see updates every day. And I even remember it was really bizarre, I would say. I was once in a workspace, in a co-working space, sorry, like renting a table, doing some freelance work. And then I started talking with a guy who is a developer. And then all of a sudden he was like, "Oh my God, you are the guy who manages Tumblr." And I was like, "What?" I was like, how random is this? Like, I mean, we're all in the same city, but it was like, I don't know. It
Yeah,
was
you ran into someone who checked out
yeah,
your
and I was
Tumblr.
like,
Great.
okay, like this is you know
Well, well, well.
pretty absurd, but yeah, so it was funny in the end, that coincidence, but it also showed me that there was some sort of community, and I think it had something like 5,000 followers by the end, but I just stopped posting because I kind of got over that phase, and I don't know, it was just like a thought-provoking experiment at some point.
Yeah, you decided to curate things and put it out there, and yeah, it compounded so much. Like if we talk in terms of doing one thing consistently, that you met someone who actually had checked it out. So that's great. Yeah, I saw some. There were a lot of watch-based interactions also. I've not worked with the format of watches. I've worked with mobile, desktop, tablet, the usual. So, do you have any insight on how to build the interface for watches, for smartwatches per se?
No, 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 I did not. I mean, they never designed anything thoroughly for a watch. And yeah, I mean, I said also this Tumblr page was something which, I mean, it was also an experiment to see more of interactions which were actually meaningful, perhaps on a watch as well. As much as I talk later than on Medium about like, this sort of like interface with lipstick on it, I did before that found some interactions that would make more sense perhaps on a watch. But yeah, but what I did also work, well, and now it's been a while, but when I was doing more consultancy and also working for design agencies, is also I designed, well, I also had a project through about voice interfaces, and I do have a project. If you look on internet, you will find it. I think I released it as a dummy project on 2015, 16. And it was a cooking application for the iPad that you could control with your voice. And that was kind of my first experiment on designing an application. And it was, I mean, you can check it out. It's still live. I don't know where it is anymore.
Yeah, I think it's not Beha. I saw the thumbnail. Okay. Gold, is it?
Yeah, the gourmet thing. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was just a pun with a name and stuff. But yeah, for me, it was really a great way to experiment with other, yeah, with other interfaces, like voice interface. I still do believe that it's a very powerful interface, even if it has not hit mainstream,
Going beyond the
for
screen,
several reasons.
like going beyond design.
Going beyond the screen,
Yeah,
yeah,
correct.
like hands free.
Right.
And again, I don't think it hit mainstream for several reasons, and one is because of it's very hard. It's very, very hard to hit mainstream, to understand how people speak their own language or even a second language. Like me speaking English surely sounds absurd to some native English speakers. Uh, the same way that if some English speaker would speak to me in Spanish, it would sound to some degree also funny or just different to me. So it is the same thing for voice interfaces, and I think that's the main challenge. But regardless of that challenge, I think is a very interesting technology because it opens so many possibilities. And back then, for me, was the challenge was like how to have an interface that basically tells you what to do step by step while you're cooking a recipe. and it tells you, okay, now you have to do this thing, now you have to do that thing, and vice versa. And again, it seemed to me like a very interesting idea back then. Over time, when I did a little bit, just a little bit of user testing, I figured that it was really, really hard what I was trying to get at. And uh, I mean, I actually managed to build a prototype in React together with a couple of friends, yeah, with Anthony and Matteo. We worked together in an agency in Berlin, in a design agency in Berlin, and that's where basically we had some time given by the company to set up this project, but then we kept on working on it because, yeah, we really believed in it, and it was also fun. We just really also enjoyed collaborate. I mean, working together, and we had fun. So in the end, we did build a prototype, but as I said, as it was, I think was that was one of the hardest lessons I learned because I put so much time in it, and then after putting together the prototype, and even in React, it's like it was a real thing. We figured that it was really wasted time. It was really like inception for my, you know, for how I would understand about how I would learn later about research, how I would later about how to validate early, how to prototype cheaply, many other things which I learned later. But that was the hard lesson. Um, Even if I again,
And I'm sure you have like insight from and reflections from that project because you did it for exploring your curiosity about how things work beyond the screen. Like
absolutely.
you have that itch sometimes to go beyond what you're actually might be confined to do. So designing the whole experience for a human, like how they would do. So that's truly there, and yeah, appreciate your effort. So I would like to wrap our session and conversation up with what are you doing these days and what do you have any plans? Like, what are you learning these days? I think a lot of what we discussed was a couple of years earlier. So, what are you up to these days, exploring, learning, like looking into?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of tech, yeah, I mean, you said it in the beginning, right? I'm mentoring more, so I'm definitely trying to learn about rather, let's say, soft skills more than hard skills at the moment. So yeah, I mean, I haven't really shared much also as in terms of articles or stuff like that, but I did also, speak in some other like podcasts or some other interviews and stuff like that. So, but then most of my time these days goes to mentoring, and yeah, I mean, I really enjoy that. For me, it's also a way of developing further into well my skills into another direction, which is not necessarily just getting better at the craft, but also getting better at dealing and helping other designers, and helping them grow and develop and reach their goals.
Yeah. What is the one thing that you've stressed like a lot to all the designers or people that you've talked to in your sessions? Like you that comes up every time. Like what is a common thing?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind basically is a lot of people ask for portfolio and CV reviews.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge in itself. And I see, I mean, and more for more junior designers or mid-level designers because, but even for senior designers, but just because when you're starting, it's more of a challenge because you don't really have anything to go back to. You really start from like a blank state. And yeah, I find generally a lot of questions really, or a lot of like problems in terms of putting a message together
Right.
that makes sense. So it has a lot to do with how you see yourself, right? But when you don't have experience in your back, it's hard for you to see yourself because you have a lot of opportunities. You're just studying something, so you start from a blank state, so you can go any direction you want, right? So it's somehow it could seem counterintuitive, but I think it's actually yeah, so that's why I think it's actually more of a, let's say, of an issue that comes more from younger designers. but in the end, it also comes later in the days. And for me, it all comes down to, again, putting together a message and making a statement and understanding what are you trying to say, and trying to say in the least words possible and the more engaging way possible. And I think that's really a big challenge. And I like to make an emphasis on that because I do believe that in the end, designers should be great communicators. Um, and knowing how to knowing how to organize your thinking, it's for me, it's one of the most important skills that a designer can really own. And once you organize your thinking, I think you're in a better place to then communicate your thinking. And in communicating it, then that's also the craft of, yeah, making also an engaging message, but also a message that it's really, has a line of thought, a clear line of thought that then you can understand. So, and I think that is something which I would really love to see more design schools and more attention being brought by the industry, because I think it's really overlooked. It's really overlooked because I do think it's really overlooked, and I don't think there's enough stress, and I think it's really important to know how to speak about how to organize your thinking and speak about it in a organized manner. Um, Even when you put together a UI, it's all about that.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
trying to
Also,
understand what comes first.
presenting a product, like how you would do when you would build a product,
Yeah, and a pitch.
and thinking of your profile as a product, like highlighting the specific things like you need help with, instead of like do a review. I think doing a review is like, would you, what do you like about my product? I think I could connect that to it.
Absolutely, absolutely, exactly. You got it right. Yeah, so I think that, yeah, but it just again, in the end, all comes down to communication, and design is definitely very linked to communication in a creative manner, where you're generating things and ideas and things. But in the end, you really have to master that craft of, yeah, being capable to put together a message, and making it clear and engaging and concise and all that. And yeah, and I think that was also why I started writing back then, and publishing on Medium, because I really wanted to challenge myself to write, and to write something that would engage people. And with this article about the research, um, that's when I was like, okay, I think I managed to write something that engages people. I think I cracked the code a little bit. But I did also took some workshops, and I did also did some reading, and I did so many drafts of that same article many times. It took me so many weeks to put it together. So what I'm trying to say is that it's nothing which I knew before writing, and I think I still can improve. But it's a matter of just practicing and trying to own that skill. And I think any designer could benefit from doing that sort of exercise of writing, for example.
Yeah, writing really helps you organize your thinking, I think. And when you do the drafts, it's like you're revisiting your thoughts and making cross questioning yourself. Like, is it what I'm thinking is accurate, or what if you challenge
Yeah.
yourself throughout that writing process? Like if you are publishing something, like yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and absolutely. It was a pleasure to speak with you and to talk about all these interesting topics. Definitely research lies on the bottom of my heart. So happy to speak about it.
Hope to see you around soon. And thank you so much for your
No,
time.
thank you for yeah, for the interview, and for giving me the chance to also speak with you all. And I think this podcast is really, it's really great. I also hear the other episodes, so yeah, I'm also humbled and honored to also be in this podcast. So thank you.